The rain came down in sheets as my mother-in-law shoved another suitcase through the front door. It landed on the porch with a wet thud, spilling my daughter's clothes across the wooden planks. "You will never be part of this family," she screamed, her face twisted with disgust. "You were always beneath us." My 3 children stood behind me, crying. Emma, my oldest at 8, tried to shield her 6-year-old sister Sophie from the rain. My youngest, 4-year-old Theo, clung to my leg, sobbing. My husband Nathan stood in the doorway behind his mother, silent. He wouldn't even look at me. His father stood beside him with crossed arms, watching our humiliation with cold satisfaction. "Nathan, please," I begged, my voice breaking. "It's pouring rain. The kids." "You should have thought about the kids before you refused to help this family," my mother-in-law spat. "You're selfish, ungrateful, and worthless. Get off our property." I tried to push past her to grab Theo's asthma medication from inside, but she blocked the door. "You're not coming back in. Ever." The door slammed in my face. The deadbolt clicked. I stood there in the pouring rain with my 3 crying children, our belongings scattered on the porch, and nowhere to go. My whole body shook. Not from the cold, but from rage. "You'll regret this," I whispered to the closed door. From inside, I heard them laughing. I pounded on the door again. "Please. Theo's inhaler. He needs his medication." Nothing. The lights in the living room went off, plunging the porch into darkness except for the street lamp at the end of the driveway. Theo was wheezing now, his little chest heaving. Panic clawed at my throat. I banged harder. "Nathan, your son needs his inhaler. Please." The door cracked open just enough for Nathan's father to throw a small bag at my feet. "Here. Now leave before we call the police." The door slammed again. I scrambled for the bag, found the inhaler, and helped Theo take 2 puffs. His breathing slowly steadied, but his tears didn't stop. Emma was trying to gather our scattered belongings while Sophie cried beside her. My 8-year-old daughter shouldn't have to be this strong, this responsible. None of them should be standing in the rain like this. How had I trusted these people? How had I believed Nathan when he said his family would help us? How had I been so blind? I looked back at the house, the mansion where we had lived for the past 18 months. Every window was dark now, as if we had never existed inside those walls. Nathan had turned his back on us. His parents had thrown us out like garbage. And somewhere inside me, something fundamental broke and then hardened into steel. My name is Laura Bennett. I'm 32 years old, and I thought I knew what family meant. 6 years ago, I married Nathan Bennett, a man who seemed kind and ambitious. His family was wealthy. Old money, the kind that came with expectations and rules I didn't understand at first. I grew up ordinary. My mother raised me alone after my father left when I was 5. We lived in a small apartment, paycheck to paycheck. I never knew my grandfather, my father's father, because he had disappeared from our lives before I was born. When I met Nathan, I thought I had found everything I had been missing. Love, security, a real family. His parents welcomed me with polite smiles that I mistook for warmth. But I had been wrong about all of it. Nothing about me ever looked wealthy enough for them. My clothes weren't designer. My education wasn't from the right schools. My job as an elementary school teacher was respectable but not impressive. They never let me forget I wasn't one of them. And when things got hard, when Nathan lost his job and we needed help, their generosity came with strings that slowly wrapped around my throat until I couldn't breathe. But they made one critical mistake when they threw us out tonight. They assumed I had nothing. They assumed I was powerless. They had no idea what was coming. I met Nathan at a charity fundraiser where I was volunteering. He was charming, confident, and seemed genuinely interested in my work with children. We talked for hours that first night. "You're different," he had said. "Real. Not like the people I usually meet." We dated for a year before he proposed. The wedding was small but elegant. His parents insisted on planning everything. I should have noticed the warning signs then, the way they made decisions without asking me, the way they changed the guest list to remove some of my friends. But I was in love. I overlooked it. Nathan's mother, Victoria, was polished and controlled. Everything about her screamed perfection. Her clothes, her house, her expectations. She smiled at me during the wedding, but the smile never reached her eyes. His father, William, was quieter but no less judgmental. He assessed everything, always calculating value and worth. The early years weren't terrible. We lived in our own apartment. Nathan worked in finance. I taught 2nd grade. We were happy, or at least I thought we were. Then I got pregnant with Emma. Victoria's first comment was, "I hope it's a boy. The Bennett family needs a proper heir." When Emma was born, Victoria barely held her. "Well, Maybe the next one will be a boy. There would be 2 more daughters before they gave up hoping. The subtle insults began early and never stopped. Victoria had a gift for making cruel comments sound like helpful advice. "You're serving pasta again?" Nathan grew up with more sophisticated meals. "Those clothes are charming, dear, but perhaps something more elegant for the country club? The girls are so spirited. Have you considered more discipline?" She criticized my parenting, my cooking, my appearance, my career. Everything I did was wrong or insufficient. And Nathan never defended me. He would just shrug and say, "That's how she is. Don't take it personally." But it was personal. Every comment was designed to remind me I didn't belong in their world. When Sophie was born, another girl, Victoria's disappointment was obvious. "Well, I suppose some families just don't produce sons." The comment was directed at me, as if gender was something I controlled. As if my daughters were failures rather than the bright, beautiful children they were. William barely acknowledged the girls. He would nod at them during family dinners but never engaged, never played with them, never showed affection. They were girls, and therefore unimportant in the Bennett family hierarchy. I started dreading family gatherings. Every visit to their mansion was an exercise in swallowing humiliation while pretending everything was fine. But I stayed quiet. I smiled through it. I told myself it didn't matter what they thought as long as Nathan and I were happy. Then Nathan lost his job. The financial collapse happened suddenly. Nathan's firm downsized, and he was let go. Severance lasted 3 months. Then our savings dwindled. Bills piled up. Nathan spiraled. He stopped looking for work and instead spent hours on the couch, scrolling through his phone. When I suggested jobs that seemed beneath his previous position, he got angry. "I'm not working retail, Laura. I have standards. Standards don't pay rent." I picked up extra tutoring jobs, but it wasn't enough. We fell behind on everything. That's when Victoria made her offer. "Come live with us. We have plenty of space. You can save money and get back on your feet." It sounded like generosity. Like family helping family. Nathan jumped at it. "Just temporarily," he promised me. 6 months, maybe a year. Then we'll have our own place again. I should have said no. I should have found another way. But I was exhausted and desperate, and I foolishly believed his parents actually wanted to help. We moved into their mansion on a gray October afternoon. The house was enormous. 8 bedrooms, perfectly decorated, intimidating in its elegance. "You'll follow our household rules, of course," Victoria said as we unpacked. "Dinner at 7. No loud noise after 9. The girls will need to learn proper manners." The conditions began immediately. And they only got worse. Living with Nathan's parents was like living under surveillance. Every move was monitored and judged. Victoria created schedules for everything. When the girls could play, when they could watch television, what they could eat. She gave me a list of chores that made me feel more like hired help than family. "Since you're not working right now," she said sweetly, though I was still tutoring online, "you can help maintain the house." I cooked meals to her specifications. I cleaned rooms that were already spotless. I watched my daughters tiptoe through the mansion, afraid to touch anything or make noise. Nathan did nothing. He had moved into his childhood bedroom and seemed to regress into being his parents' son rather than my husband. He deferred every decision to them. "Mom says we should eat in the formal dining room. Dad thinks the girls are too loud. They want us to follow their rules. It's their house." His parents controlled everything. When I could use the car, what time I needed to be home if I left, even what I dressed the girls in. "Those clothes are too casual," Victoria said one morning. "The Bennetts maintain certain standards." I felt my identity disappearing piece by piece. I wasn't Laura anymore. I was just the disappointing daughter-in-law who had failed to produce a male heir and couldn't even support her own family. But I bit my tongue and endured it. For the kids. For the promise that this was temporary. The pressure about having a son became relentless. Victoria brought it up constantly, sometimes subtly, sometimes overtly cruel. "My friend's daughter just had twin boys. The family is thrilled. Emma would be such a good big sister to a brother. Don't you think, Laura? It's not too late, you know. You're still young enough." The comments got harsher when I didn't respond. She started directing them at my daughters, making sure they knew they weren't enough. "If your mother had given your father a son, things would be different. Boys are so much easier to raise. Girls are just complicated." Emma started asking me why Grandma didn't like her. Sophie became quieter, more withdrawn. Even Theo, my happy little boy, started to seem nervous around his grandmother. And Nathan? He did nothing. When I confronted him about his mother's behavior, he sighed. She's old-fashioned. Just ignore her. But you can't ignore poison when it's being fed to your children every day. You can't pretend it's not hurting them when you see them slowly believing they're not good enough. I begged Nathan to defend our daughters. Please. Talk to your mother. Tell her to stop. Don't be so sensitive, he replied. She doesn't mean anything by it. He had chosen them over us long before the final confrontation. I just hadn't wanted to see it. 8 months into living with them, William called Nathan and me into his study. Victoria was already there, sitting primly in a leather chair. We need to discuss something important, William began. Our business is facing some difficulties. We need collateral for a loan to keep things afloat. He pulled out documents and spread them across his desk. You own that small property your grandfather left you, Laura. We need you to sign it over as collateral. I stared at the papers. The property was a tiny house in a rural area, worth maybe $200,000. I had never even seen it. It had been left to me in my grandfather's will years ago, managed by a trust. If you don't help us, Victoria said coldly, we'll have no choice but to ask you to leave. We've been supporting you for months. It's time you contributed. Nathan looked at me expectantly. It's just collateral, Laura. We're not selling it. And we need this. But something in William's eyes told me this wasn't just collateral. If I signed those papers, I would never see that property again. They would take it, lose it, and blame me for not doing enough to help. I need time to think, I said. Victoria's expression hardened. There's nothing to think about. You either help this family or you don't. I need time, I repeated, standing up. I want to talk to a lawyer first. A lawyer. William's voice rose. You ungrateful. I said I need time, I interrupted, and walked out of the study. The next day, I told them no. I wouldn't sign. The reaction was explosive. Victoria screamed that I was selfish, that I had always been a burden, that I had never appreciated what they had done for us. You've taken our hospitality, lived in our home, eaten our food, and this is how you repay us, she shrieked. By refusing to help when we need it? Nathan stood beside his mother, his face red with anger. You should have married someone useful, he said to me, his voice cold. Someone who actually brought value to this family. The words cut deeper than any of Victoria's insults. This was my husband, the man who had promised to love and cherish me, telling me I was worthless. I looked at him for a long moment, searching for any trace of the man I had married. There was nothing. He had become his parents' puppet, and I was the enemy. I'm not signing, I said quietly. That property is all I have left for my family. Then you have a choice to make, William said. Sign the papers, or pack your things. I chose my dignity. I chose not to let them steal the one thing my grandfather had left me, even though I barely remembered him. That night, Nathan slept in his parents' wing of the house, and I started preparing for what I knew would come next. For one night, I thought maybe Nathan would come to his senses. He found me in our bedroom, sitting on the edge of the bed. Laura, please, he said, sitting beside me. Just sign the papers. It's not worth fighting over. We can work this out. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe my husband still cared about me and our children more than his parents' approval. Nathan, if I sign that, we'll have nothing. That property is the only asset I have. If your parents' business fails, we lose everything. They're family, he said. We have to trust them. Do we? I asked. When have they ever put us first? When have they ever treated me like family instead of an employee? He didn't answer. Instead, he stood up and walked to the door. I'll tell them you need more time. But later that night, I overheard them talking in William's study. I stood in the hallway, frozen, listening to my husband plot against me. We'll just forge her signature, Nathan said. She'll never know until it's done. Are you sure? Victoria asked. She might cause legal problems. Let her try. We have lawyers. She has nothing. They laughed. All three of them laughed at how easy I would be to manipulate and destroy. I walked away silently, my heart breaking and hardening at the same time. The man I married was gone, if he had ever existed at all. The next morning, I confronted them at breakfast. The girls were still asleep upstairs. I know you're planning to forge my signature, I said calmly, standing in the doorway of the dining room. All three of them froze. Victoria recovered first. How dare you accuse us of? I heard you last night, I interrupted. All of you. Planning to commit fraud using my identity. Nathan's face flushed. You were eavesdropping? In the house where I'm supposed to live as family? Yes, I was walking down the hallway when I heard my husband plotting against me. William stood up. You're being dramatic, as usual. We were simply discussing options. Options that include stealing from me, I said. I want us to leave. Today. Leave. Victoria laughed. And go where? You have no money, no job, no prospects. You need us. Nathan found his voice then. The kids are better off here anyway. With people who can actually provide for them. You're just dragging them down, Laura. The cruelty in his voice was breathtaking. He was willing to say anything, hurt anyone, to please his parents. Then I'll leave without you, I said to Nathan. If you want to stay with your parents more than you want to be with your children, that's your choice. Fine, Victoria said. Pack your things. You and those girls are out of here by tonight. The eviction happened quickly. I had expected it, but the cruelty of it still shocked me. They literally shoved us out during a rainstorm. They refused to let me grab all of Theo's medication. They laughed as we struggled with our suitcases in the pouring rain. Victoria's final words echoed in my head. You were always beneath us. I managed to get the kids into my car. An old sedan that barely ran. Emma sat in the front seat, trying to be brave. Sophie and Theo cried in the back. I had $47 in my bank account. No family to call. No close friends who could take in a woman with 3 kids. We were truly alone. I drove to a cheap motel on the edge of town and paid for one night. The room was small and smelled like cigarettes, but it had a roof and beds. I tucked the kids in and sat on the bathroom floor, finally letting myself cry. How had everything fallen apart so completely? How had I ended up here, with nothing? But beneath the grief and fear was rage. Pure, clarifying rage. The Bennetts had humiliated me, rejected my children, and tried to steal from me. They thought they had won. They thought I was broken. They had no idea what was about to happen. Because I had just received an email that afternoon. One I hadn't had time to read until now, sitting on that bathroom floor. The email was from a law firm I had never heard of. Westmore and Associates. The subject line read, Urgent, Estate of Thomas Hartley. Thomas Hartley. My grandfather's name. The man I had barely known, who had left me that small property years ago. With shaking hands, I opened the email. Dear Ms. Bennett. We represent the estate of your late grandfather, Thomas Hartley. We have been attempting to reach you regarding a significant matter concerning your inheritance. Please contact us immediately. I called the number at the bottom of the email, not caring that it was nearly midnight. A woman answered. Westmore and Associates. This is Laura Bennett. I just got an email about my grandfather's estate. Thomas Hartley. Ms. Bennett. We've been trying to reach you for weeks. Your phone number changed, and our letters were returned. Please hold while I connect you with Mr. Westmore. A man's voice came on the line. Ms. Bennett. Thank goodness. We need you to come to our office tomorrow. There's been a significant development regarding your inheritance. I thought I already inherited everything, I said. Just that one property. No, Mr. Westmore said carefully. That property was just the beginning. Your grandfather's full estate has now been released from trust. You're the sole heir. What does that mean? It means, Ms. Bennett, that you've inherited hotels, commercial properties, land holdings, and investment portfolios worth approximately $350 million. The phone nearly slipped from my hand. I took the kids with me to the law office the next morning. I had no babysitter and no choice. They sat quietly in the waiting room while Mr. Westmore explained everything. My grandfather had been a self-made millionaire. He had built a hotel empire from nothing, investing in properties across 3 states. When he died 10 years ago, he had structured his estate carefully. Your father was his only child, but they had a falling out, Mr. Westmore explained. Your grandfather essentially disowned him. However, he never stopped loving you. He set up a trust that would pass everything to you under specific conditions. What conditions? You had to turn 30. You had to have children of your own. And you had to demonstrate financial responsibility. Which is why he left you that first property as a test. You kept it, didn't sell it impulsively, and managed it through the trust. That triggered the release of the full estate. I stared at the documents spread across his desk. Properties. Hotel chains. Investment portfolios. My name on everything. This can't be real, I whispered. It's very real. You're an extremely wealthy woman, Ms. Bennett. And given your current situation, he glanced at the motel address I had given, I suggest we move quickly to establish accounts and get you settled properly. Within hours, I had access to funds. Real funds. Money that meant I never had to be afraid again. Money that meant my children would have everything they needed. But more than that, I had power. And the Bennetts had no idea. I rented a luxury apartment downtown. 3 bedrooms, modern kitchen, a view of the city. The kids were overwhelmed by the space, by the newness of everything. "Is this really ours?" Emma asked, running her hands over the granite countertops. "Yes, baby. This is ours." I enrolled them in a private school with counseling services. They needed therapy after everything they had been through, and I made sure they got it. Sophie stopped having nightmares within weeks. Theo's asthma improved in the clean, stress-free environment. Meanwhile, I started learning about my grandfather's businesses. I met with hotel managers, reviewed financial statements, and discovered I had a natural aptitude for understanding business operations. "Your grandfather would be proud," one of his old business partners told me during a meeting. "You have his mind for numbers." I started making changes, small at first then larger. I updated outdated policies, invested in renovations, improved employee benefits. The businesses began to thrive under attention they hadn't received in years. And I kept everything quiet. No social media announcements. No flashy displays. I lived well but not ostentatiously. As far as anyone from my old life knew, I had simply disappeared. Nathan tried calling a few times, but I blocked his number. His parents didn't try at all. Why would they? They assumed I was struggling somewhere, broken by their rejection. Let them assume. The truth would arrive soon enough. 3 months after they threw us out, Nathan called from a number I didn't recognize. I answered out of curiosity. "Laura? It's me. What do you want, Nathan?" We need to talk. About the property. The one we asked you to sign over." I almost laughed. "The answer is still no. You don't understand. The business is failing faster than we expected. We need that collateral desperately. Please. Laura. For old time's sake." "For old time's sake?" I repeated. "Like when you threw your children out in the rain. Like when you called me worthless. Those old times. I'm sorry about that. We were under pressure. But we're family." "No," I interrupted. "We're not family. You made that clear. And I don't owe you anything. Laura, please." I hung up. My hands were shaking, but not with fear. With satisfaction. The desperation in his voice had been music to my ears. The small property they wanted was worth nothing compared to what I now controlled. But they didn't know that. They thought it was my only asset, and they were drowning without it. Mr. Westmore had researched their business. "They're hemorrhaging money," he told me. "Bad investments, poor management, and several loans coming due. Without significant capital injection, they'll go under within 6 months." "Good," I said. And I meant it. The Bennett family's financial collapse became a slow-motion disaster. I watched from a distance as it unfolded. First, they applied for loans and were denied. Their credit was stretched too thin, their business model too unstable. Then their staff started quitting. Word got out that paychecks were late, that the work environment was toxic. Key employees left for competitors. William tried to maintain appearances, but rumors spread quickly in their social circle. "Did you hear the Bennetts are having money troubles?" The whispers at country clubs and charity events. Victoria's friends started making excuses not to see her. Lunch invitations dried up. The social standing she valued so much began to crumble. Nathan started drinking. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he had been fired from another job for showing up intoxicated. And through it all, they blamed me. Me, the woman they had thrown away. I was the villain in their story, the ungrateful daughter-in-law who had refused to help family. But I had discovered something crucial. Their mansion, the house they were so proud of, was tied to their business loans. If the business failed, they would lose everything, including their home. Mr. Westmore brought me the property documents one afternoon. The bank will foreclose within 90 days if they can't make payments. And they can't. I studied the papers, an idea forming. "Can we buy the debt?" He smiled slowly. Yes, we can." The local business journal ran a story. Bennett Holdings faces bankruptcy. It detailed years of mismanagement, risky investments, and mounting debts. Victoria was photographed leaving the grocery store, and someone commented online, "She doesn't look so superior now, does she?" The public humiliation they had tried to inflict on me was now directed at them. Their friends abandoned them. Their business associates distanced themselves. The Bennett name, once respected, became associated with failure. Nathan showed up at Emma's school one day. Security called me immediately. "He tried to pick her up," the principal said. "We didn't let him near her." I drove there immediately, my heart pounding. Nathan was in the parking lot, disheveled and desperate. "I just want to see my kids," he said when he saw me. You had a chance to be their father. You chose your parents instead. Laura, please. Everything's falling apart. The business, the house. I need help. You need help. I stared at him. Where were you when we needed help? When your mother threw us out in the rain? When Theo couldn't breathe because you wouldn't let me get his medicine? He had no answer. He just stood there, broken and pathetic. Stay away from us, I said. Or I'll get a restraining order. He drove away. I never saw him at the school again. Victoria and William tried one last desperate move. They sued me for damages. They claimed I had sabotaged their business, turned Nathan against them, and maliciously withheld help. The lawsuit was ridiculous, but it gave me an opportunity one hadn't expected. During discovery, all their financial documents became public record. That's when the judge noticed something interesting. One of their major business developments was built on land they didn't own. They had assumed they had purchased it years ago, but there had been an error in the title transfer. The land was actually part of my grandfather's estate, which meant it was now mine. They've been operating illegally for 15 years, my lawyer explained. They owe you back rent and fees totaling millions. The courtroom was silent when this came to light. Victoria's face went white. William looked like he might pass out. The judge dismissed their lawsuit and ordered them to pay me for unauthorized use of my property. Combined with their other debts, this was the final blow. The business collapsed completely within days. Bankruptcy was filed. Assets were seized. And the bank moved to foreclose on their house. There will be an auction, Mr. Westmore told me. The property will sell to the highest bidder. I sat in my office, looking out at the city, and made my decision. I want to buy it. The house. Yes. But anonymously. Through a holding company. I don't want them to know it's me until the very end. The foreclosure auction was held on a gray morning in November. About 20 people attended, mostly real estate investors looking for a deal. I sat in the back, wearing sunglasses and a scarf, unrecognizable. Victoria and William weren't there. They couldn't bear to watch their home being sold. The bidding started at $1 million. It climbed quickly as investors competed. When it reached $2 million, most dropped out. At $2.3 million, only one other bidder remained. I raised my paddle. $2.5 million. The auctioneer looked surprised. $2.5 million? Going once, going twice. The other bidder shook his head and stepped back. Sold. To bidder number 17. I walked out without speaking to anyone. The house was mine. Everything had come full circle. Mr. Westmore handled the paperwork through my holding company, Bennett Properties LLC. The irony of the name wasn't lost on me. The Bennetts would receive their eviction notice within 30 days. They would have to leave the home they had been so proud of, the home they had used as a weapon against me. And they still didn't know who owned it now. That revelation would come later, at exactly the right moment. The eviction notice arrived at the Bennett house on a Tuesday afternoon. I imagined Victoria's reaction when she opened it. The shock, the disbelief, the fury. According to my lawyer, she called the management company immediately, screaming about lawyers and lawsuits and how this was illegal. The foreclosure was completely legal, Mrs. Bennett, the property manager told her calmly. You have 30 days to vacate. The new owner has been very generous with the timeline. Who is the new owner? Victoria demanded. I want to speak to them directly. That information is confidential. You'll receive all communications through this office. She tried everything. William called in favors from old friends, but no one could help them. Nathan drove to the management company's office and caused a scene, demanding to know who had bought his parents' house. Security escorted him out. The 30 days passed quickly. I watched from a distance as they packed their belongings, as moving trucks arrived, as their empire crumbled into cardboard boxes. Neighbors watched with curiosity and thinly veiled satisfaction. The Bennetts had never been kind to people they considered beneath them. Now those people watched them fall. On the morning of move-out day, Victoria stood on the front porch, yelling at a neighbor who had commented on their situation. This is temporary. We'll be back. You'll see. But they wouldn't be back. And they were about to discover why. I arrived at the house at exactly 10 a.m., the moment the Bennetts were required to be gone. My children were at school, safe and unaware of what I was about to do. The moving truck was still in the driveway. Victoria was directing movers with the same commanding tone she had used when she ran the household. William stood beside their car, looking older and defeated. Nathan was loading boxes, his movements mechanical and tired. I parked on the street and walked up the driveway. Victoria saw me first. Her face transformed from anger to confusion to rage. What are you doing here? She spat. Come to gloat. Actually, I said calmly, I came to see my property. Your property? This isn't She stopped, her face going pale as understanding dawned. I pulled out the deed and handed it to her. I bought it at auction. Through a holding company, so you wouldn't know until now. Victoria's hands shook as she read the document. William walked over, and I watched the realization hit him too. You, he whispered. How? You have no money. You're nobody. I was nobody, I corrected. But it turns out my grandfather left me quite a lot. Hotels, properties, investments. About $350 million worth. The silence was absolute. Even the movers had stopped to listen. Nathan stared at me like he'd never seen me before. 350 million? You forced us out of this house, I said, looking at Victoria. You threw my children into the rain. You called me worthless. You tried to steal from me. Laura, we didn't know, William started. Exactly. You didn't know. You judged me by what I looked like, not by who I was. You valued appearance over character. And now you're leaving your home because I own it. Victoria's face crumpled. You can't do this. We have nowhere to go. Neither did I replied. Neither did my children. But we survived. I'm sure you will too. Nathan approached me, tears streaming down his face. Laura, please. I'm sorry. I was wrong. I should have protected you and the kids. I should have stood up to them. Yes, I agreed. You should have. But you didn't. You chose them over your children. Over your wife. Over every promise you made. I know I messed up. But please, we can work this out. We can be a family again. No, I said firmly. We can't. You had a chance to be a husband and father. You threw it away. And I've moved on. Victoria tried one more time. Laura, be reasonable. We're family. We made mistakes, but we can fix this. You can let us stay here, we can work together. Family. I repeated. You told me I would never be part of this family. You called my daughters unimportant because they weren't boys. You treated us like servants and then discarded us when we wouldn't let you steal from us. I looked at all three of them. These people who had tried so hard to break me. They looked small now, powerless and desperate. Everything they had valued, money, status, control, was gone. You have 2 hours to finish moving out, I said. After that, anything left behind will be donated to charity. I turned and walked back to my car, leaving them standing in the driveway of the house that was no longer theirs. I didn't look back. There was nothing left to say. The property manager arrived shortly after to ensure they left on time. I drove away, finally free of the people who had tried to define my worth by their standards. 3 weeks later, I stood in the entrance hall of the Bennett house with my children. We had spent the time cleaning, redecorating, and erasing every trace of the family that had lived here before. This is our new home? Sophie asked, her eyes wide. Yes, baby. This is ours. Emma walked through the room slowly, taking everything in. I remember being scared here. When we lived here before. I know, I said, kneeling beside her. But those people are gone now. And we're going to make new memories. Happy ones. Theo ran through the hallway, laughing, his voice echoing off the high ceilings. The sound filled the space with joy it had never held before. We weren't moving into this house for revenge. We were moving in because I wanted my children to understand something crucial. Fear doesn't get to win. The people who hurt us don't get to keep the power. This house had been a symbol of everything the Bennetts valued. Wealth, status, superiority. Now it would be something different. It would be a home filled with love, laughter, and the knowledge that your worth isn't determined by what others think of you. I had rebuilt my life from nothing. I had protected my children. I had stood up for myself when it would have been easier to stay small and quiet. The Bennetts had tried to break me, but instead they had forced me to discover my own strength. They had pushed me toward a legacy I hadn't known existed. They had given me the motivation to become someone they could never diminish. That evening, as I tucked the kids into bed in their new rooms, Emma asked me a question. Mommy, are you happy now? I thought about everything we had been through. The pain, the fear, the nights I didn't know how we would survive. But also the strength we had found, the life we had built, the future that stretched out before us full of possibility. Yes, sweetheart, I said honestly. I'm happy now. And I was. Not because I had gotten revenge on the people who hurt us, though I wouldn't lie and say that didn't feel satisfying, but because I had proven to myself and my children that we could survive anything. That our value wasn't determined by others' opinions. That strength sometimes looks like a single mother standing in the rain, refusing to let cruelty break her spirit. The Bennetts' downfall had been their own fault. Their greed, their cruelty, their inability to see value in anything that didn't fit their narrow worldview. I hadn't destroyed them. I had simply refused to let them destroy me. As I closed Emma's door and walked downstairs through the quiet house, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. This wasn't just a house anymore. It was a symbol of everything I had overcome and everything I had become. The woman who had been thrown out in the rain was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, someone who knew her worth, someone who would never again let anyone make her feel small. I walked out onto the front porch where I had once stood shivering and humiliated. The evening was warm, the sky painted in shades of pink and gold. My children were safe upstairs. My future was secure. And the people who had tried to break me were learning to live with the consequences of their cruelty. Justice hadn't been loud or dramatic. It had been quiet, strategic, and absolutely devastating. And it had taught me the most important lesson of all. When you know your worth, no one can take it from you. Not with words, not with rejection, not with anything. I had won. Not because I had taken their house, but because I had never let them take my dignity. That was the real victory. Everything else was just proof.